we are back. The judges have returned, and we have within our possession the knowledge of who will be advancing to the semi-finals of this competition. So, ladies and gentlemen, the motion before us read, this House prefers incentive-based occupational health schemes over punitive regulation. So what did we get in this debate? Well, the debate started with Sahara Gonzalez telling us that there are a few things. They tell us that the reason why we should be preferring incentive-based occupational health is because one, it is cost-effective. Two, it increases productivity. Three, it gives us greater staff turnover. And four, we get positive culture. These are four really important and impactful claims in the debate, and we thought that they were pretty interesting. Just want to take the opportunity now to just point out something that happened. See, these four claims, three of these claims rather, productivity, staff turnover, positive culture, and another claim that came out later in the debate from a second speaker, Alea, that being tech innovation. Wolmer didn't think that these were accessible claims in the debate. See, Wolmer's contends that the debate is primarily about occupational health, and therefore any analysis that exists outside of the realm of occupational health is not one that is allowed within the debate. The judges didn't agree. The judges think that the motion questions whether we should do occupational health schemes over punitive regulation. And while it is perfectly reasonable to conclude that a very good reason to prefer incentive-based occupational health is for better occupational health, we don't think it's outside the remit of the debate to say, well, we prefer the incentive-based occupational health because it's cheaper, or because it leads to greater results, or because it increases productivity or lower staff turnover. We think these are very legitimate reasons for why you'd want to incentivize occupational health versus punitive regulation, because you get safety, but you get these other kinds of things. So we credited that these are indeed legitimate arguments in the debate. But herein lies the contention that the judges have with Team Clarendon College. We accept that these are legitimate considerations in the debate, but they were not fully substantiated, is our problem. Specifically, the productivity argument, the staff turnover argument, and the argument on positive culture. We need to understand a little bit more, Sahara, how it improves productivity. You tell me about theory X and theory Y, and you tell me a little bit about it. But what is theory X and theory Y? You tell us that theory X leads to this outcome and theory Y leads to that outcome. What is it? Like, I know what theory X and Y is, but I have to approach the debate as with the principle of tabula rasa, like a blank slate. I know only as much as a reasonably well-read citizen who reads the newspaper, watches the news, understands. And I don't think that that individual will necessarily understand the theory X and Y of productivity and incentives versus punishment and of organizational structure. And so we wanted to hear a little bit more about that, a lot more about that. Even more so with arguments on staff turnover. How does an incentive-based program reduce staff turnover? You tell me that you get less recruitment and more retention. Sure, how? We don't know how having an incentive-based system gives me less turnover. It seems intuitive, but you have a big job to play, which is to tell us that intuitiveness about it. So while we credit these as legitimate arguments in the debate, we're weighing them versus other substantiated and more sophisticatedly warranted arguments in the debate. And we think that at the end of the day, they don't really hit home as hard as they could have. And here's the honest truth about competition at this point in time. You may think I'm being like super critical of you guys, but it was clear to the judges that at this stage in the competition, we have expert teams. And so the bar is higher at this stage in the competition. We don't have teams that are new to debating, teams that we think need encouragement. We think what really will benefit you at this point in time is, honestly, criticism. I say that to say, do not think that I'm saying that this was a bad debate, but at this tier of competition, with the teams that existed in this competition, there is so much more that we're expecting from you guys, because you guys are objectively excellent debaters. And so my criticisms are going to be in the context of you guys being good debaters. All right. So let's press on in the debate, right? So what do we hear from Josh Null? Well, Josh Null opens up the debate in a very interesting way, right? Josh Null tells us that one, if you don't find value in the incentive, that there are certain people who will not do anything with the incentive. That was Josh Null's rebuttal to your arguments on incentive. He's the one who introduced the idea of productivity not being consequential. The judges disagreed, but then he did some really important things. Josh Null tells us about collective safety and how in order for an incentive to be super impactful, then it has to be a really attractive incentive. And here is the problem with that. Josh Null tells us that money and financial incentives, which is what we understood at this point in the debate Clarendon College was talking about. You cleared it up a little bit later in the debate, but at this point in time, Josh Null tells us, right, that financial incentives are kind of interesting, because what happens is that the wealthier people, the managers and those expert people, those individuals who aren't necessarily concerned about those kinds of financial incentives, they're not going to care about those financial incentives. They also tell us as well that there are internal social costs to punitive regulation. You know that if you don't do the right thing, you're going to be punished. Whereas an incentive regulation says, if I do an excellent thing, I will be rewarded. We think that can be brilliantly summarized with this idea. See, Wolmer's case contends that incentives increases the ceiling for good actors, but doesn't raise the floor for bad actors. Wolmer tells us that what actually happens with these incentive-based programs is that there are individuals who will do these things and they'll care, but the individual who doesn't care about the incentive-based program is intrinsically the individual who is going to be more likely to commit safety violations. We think that's really interesting, and we think we buy that idea. We buy the idea that a person who doesn't care about recognition or promotion or getting more money or being seen in a positive light by virtue of receiving these incentives is the kind of person who's more likely just not to care, who is going to be the less paid, who's going to be the most vulnerable, and that is the individual who's going to be more likely to commit safety violations. And so what we need to do is not incentivize them. Instead, we need to be punishing them. We thought that was pretty good. Now, the final thing I'll say in this debate before revealing the outcome is just a few tips to both teams, because I know that once I release the call, that's what everybody wants to hear. So here's a final piece of information. Team Wolbers, I want to caution you. See, if you want to say that a harm exists on props world, you need to be sure that that harm doesn't exist on your world. And if the harm exists in both worlds, if you're going to push that that harm exists in props world or your opponent's world, you need to prove why that harm is less in your world, or you need to show why your benefits outweigh your harms, right? This is advanced debating at this point in time. Why? See, you tell us that there's going to be less reporting on prop side, right? That there is an incentive to not report accidents. We agree. There's an incentive to not report accidents on prop side, because if you report the accidents, you won't get the incentive. But Wilmers, there's an incentive not to report the accident on your side as well. So that harm isn't mutually exclusive, because Clarendon College tells us that if you don't report the harm on your side of the house, then you don't get punished. So if you don't report it on Clarendon, you don't get the reward. If you don't report it on Wilmers, you don't get punished. So here we see a harm that's being foisted upon Clarendon College that is not mutually exclusive to Clarendon College's stance. We wanted to know, why is that harm worse on Clarendon College's side, or why is it better on Wolmer's side, or if they are the same, why the benefits outweigh the cons of that harm, right? Again, these are like super detailed criticisms that are only being levied upon these teams because of their advanced capabilities in competitive debating. So, ladies and gentlemen, after all of that is said and done, the team that has won this match and will be moving on automatically to the semi-finals of this competition. One team ends on a winning score of 279 points to the other team's 270 points. The team that will advance to the next round of competition is the team in opposition, Wolmer's Boys School. Congratulations, Wolmer's Boys School, and very well played, Clarendon College.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Wolmer.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this match, the first match in the quarterfinals of the JCSA High Schools Debate competition from 2025 carried over into 2026. Join us in a few where we will see the next match. This is between Knox College and Campion College. The motion, this house believes that remote work is a more effective tool at improving employee mental health than interventions at the workplace. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful rest of your day. All right, guys.